And then, of course, these media types. Letting you know, I'm showing you this for a reason, I'm coming to this for a reason. I know a lot of you have probably seen these symbols, are familiar with them, but what you're probably not familiar with or haven't thought about too much is the fact that these symbols are being shown to you obviously. Why? Because that is also part of the ritual. Nothing is done that we don't actually know about in some way. We are being told constantly. That's the most important thing to remember. There's a subtextual, occult type of communication happening to you. That makes you part of the ritual. This is how they work. You have one board, but you have black and white squares. You're on that board. You're going to occupy this square or the other. And the elites assume that you are part of their ritual, by the way. Okay, they may treat us like pawns or whatever, but we're still part of the game. This is very important to realize because it's also to do with the retaliation. Once we know that we're part of the game, your movement then becomes very important. How you think becomes more important than you just thinking you're an outsider looking at all of this spectacle. Well, these guys are including you in that ritual, and they're letting you know how it works. Notice the black and white, you see. Symbolism here all the time. And sort of bad boy image. Also, the black tear is a Masonic secret society trope or motif. So this is done to let us know in a way that we're talking to you subtextually, subliminally. It's Karl Rove. Again, it doesn't matter what side of the spectrum you're on. The Phoenix, as we said, the Process Church, wasn't it? Had it? No, it was the Hellfire Club. Remember? Had changed their name to the Phoenix Society at one point. And there's Chelsea Clinton wearing the inverted pentagram, not the inverted pentagram, the inverted cross, which is a patently Luciferian symbol. Here's the Star of David. And when we realize who the Davids really were, not as they've been presented in front of us, but what that word really alludes to, is again another code name for atomism. You must know this because otherwise we misinterpret the symbols. When these fellows are posing in front of the so-called Israeli flag and seem to be having this Jewish symbolism, we're misreading it completely. Camp David doesn't refer to the Jews, right? And Jews need to know this too. They're the first who need to be told this, so they're the most confused. They're the most mind-controlled of all, thinking that this is to do with their religion. It has nothing to do with their religion, and they need to be aware of this. These are Davidic symbols that refer to the commanders of Aton, the sun cult, who've committed just as many unspeakable acts of criminality, you see, to the Jewish people as they have to the Gentiles. We have a common foe, a common enemy. But that enemy is smart, it's intelligent, it's cunning, it knows how to work one side against the other or two or three sides against each other. When they're using terms like Zion, you see, and Israel, they know what these terms mean. And as I said, I was showing you these reasons for a point. They're leaving clues to tell us, to involve us in the ritual. And they're going so far nowadays to do this, where they're even making the movies, as we said when we first met in March. They want you to know that now. They want you to literally to know. They want everyone to know that there is this esoteric underpinning to reality. And it's fascinating to see, for me to watch and see how they're doing this. How they're sort of removing the lid. It's just fascinating and why that might be happening and the astrological age we're in and all of this. Almost like taking down the mask, giving us a peek. As JC said, you're peeking now. You're starting to peek, so we have to use the codes. But it's been there in front of us all the time. The clues. Bottom left there you see the symbol of the original Dodge car company. There's the modern one on the right that we all know, which is the symbol of Aries. Aries being the most important house of the zodiac to the Atonists. Anyone who knows about the whole life of Akhenaten and why he came up with Atonism know that it had to do with the movement of the sun between the signs of Taurus and Aries. And this is the movement that caused conflict in Egypt between the groups of priests. And the priests of Heliopolis and Memphis backed Akhenaten, and that's how he was able to create Atonism and do horrors or untold horrors in Egypt. So the ram And all the Aryan symbol pertains directly to the cult of Aton, as does the Star of David, of course. And there you have it in the Egyptian motif with the wings and the Star of David, the Judite connection. The pentagram and the blood circle there for Access Hollywood. Other 3 6s. I'm glad to see people are getting up to speed on that. They're not getting up to speed on what 666 really refers to, by the way. Christians just think it's a sign of Lucifer. First of all, they don't even know what Lucifer is. They have to define that term. What's the difference between Lucifer and Satan? We've done an interview on that on Red Eyes Creations. I've gone into it in the Irish Origins book. 666, very briefly, if you multiply the numbers, it's a triad number. So just from 111, 222, 333, 444, you multiply them and to get one of the meanings, 6 times 6 times 6. You see, 216 becomes a very important number in astrology. These are numbers of the initiates. It's also numbers that are found in the dimensions of the pyramid and the Ark of the Covenant and all of that kind of thing. But this is stylized in so many places. There's a couple of logos that stylize it. Here's how it's done in the Walt Disney logo. And it, in one sense, doesn't really represent anything evil. It just represents something hidden, something occult, something the initiates will understand, sacred knowledge. Even if you add the numbers, right? 666, it's 18. 18 becomes 9. But 9, 18, 27, what do these numbers mean? They refer to something. They refer to the initiated and the non-initiated person on one level. 666 was in the Bible, we find it, and it refers to the number of man, basically. It's a human number, remember? I've gone into the meaning of that as well. Or the swastika, the double-headed eagle. You're finding it all over the place, especially in the purveyance of alcohol and tobacco and these companies, because these are the old pirates, the old scions of these royal figures. The Nike logo has been exposed clearly as being connected to Saturn. And that's a huge story of what Saturn represents, Kronos, and how these symbols, the effect that they have and the meaning that they have. The skull and bones, here we have Stephen King. I mean, that's hardly a natural pose to be in, so what's being told to us here? And also drawing on tarot and astrology, you'd find it in the most bizarre places. Sometimes it's accident, sometimes it's not. But they identify, this is a fusion, a constant fusion between archetype and stereotype. This is how the things of the world get their meaning, get to be attractive to the human mind. If we just believe what's on the surface, well then, that's it. That's ignorance. Here's the poster for the Euro 26. And we notice how similar that is to the effigy of the god Moloch, which some researchers have identified as a secret society emblem, that could be found at the Bohemian Grove and places like that. The fact that it has a bull's head is nothing evil, it's just that these cults come from the age of Taurus. They're astrologically based. Don't forget about the concept of the female again, and the associations of different houses of the zodiac is involved in this. Turn the symbols around, flip them over, rearrange them. Here's a good example. What most people would think is just the ice cream company heart. If you just flip it round, it becomes 33, which is the highest degrees in Freemasonry. So I'm not saying anything about this company specifically, I'm just saying, let's examine examples of these companies to see if there's any hidden meanings and so on. I brought out in 2006 the idea of this tear or claw mark, and now suddenly you have this company coming out afterwards that literally is making it very clear that that's the case. But the interesting thing about this particular company is that particular rip corresponds with Va, the Hebrew letter, which corresponds with the number 6. So those 3 tears is actually 666. This is just the way they do it, the way they play. There's the Hebrew letter there. You're reading backwards. Aleph, Beth, Gimel is A, B, C, D. See? We get the word alive from the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph. It also means breath. You're alive because you breathe. You see, that's the number associated. Bet or Beth means house, so that's connected to the pyramid. The second letter. Gimel is translated in English as camel. The symbol of that letter is a little camel, where you have Camel cigarettes. And that can either be a C or a G. We could go. We have the time. We could go through all of this amazing stuff. Dalet is the Greek Daleth or Delta, which is the pyramid, which is the triangle. You see, connecting to the female mysteries, and how that turns out the symbolism. He, being the symbol of the male. You could go through all of these. It's really interesting. Samek down there. That's where our word stomach comes from. Nun being the goddess of the waters. It's where the German Nein. No, nothing, emptiness, no. Noon, high noon, we get that word, mem. M, the letter M is the only letter that you pronounce with your mouth closed. So in the wartime in Britain, they would say keep mum, right? That's from the Hebrew keep mem, because it means you're holding your lips closed. Well, doesn't that have a lot of meaning when you see these celebrities and rap stars, making the whisper sound or closing the mouth? They're using all of this esoterica. Just to study the so-called Hebrew alphabet, Shin is actually pronounced Shayin, and that is where we get the English word shine, to shine like the sunlight. Resh is where we get a multiplicity of words like red and Rex for king, and all the words connecting to royalty. And Rush, now there's a new drink out called Rush, which uses this symbolism tweaked slightly. And of course the very famous Yod, the very first letter of the name of God, Yod, He, Vav, He. We're just going to spend so much time on that alone. We have to move on. But here's again the way the 666 is carefully and brilliantly stylized. Here is a folder from a bank in Wells Fargo Bank I picked up, God, it must have been 10 years ago, with the Masonic symbols right on it. The hammer, the key, and the rule, but it's open to look like a compass. And there on the top right, those are colors again of the Eastern Star. We looked at how common those colors were in corporate logos, and now you find out where it comes from. It's purely Masonic. Here it is again. Who's really behind Austin Community College? Well, they're telling you in the symbol of the star is the Eastern Star of Freemasonry. There it is in the top right. There can be no doubt about it. After you've listened to like 2 hours of Jordan Maxwell talking about the black robes and the mortar boards and all the rest of it, and even the word degree, right, and the ram's skin that they often used to give you to put around your shoulders and all the rest of it, how can we be in any doubt? The very word graduate. More corporate logos directly out of Freemasonry. It's in architecture. Go around San Diego, go around LA, and you'll see the symbols. And the very architecture is Templar design. And the hidden symbolism. Here's a cover I photographed of a local in Hayward Community College, loaded with keyholes, pyramids, Cross of Lorraine. So many Masonic symbols right there on the front cover of this magazine that's given out to the students. The idea of even having 3 branches of government is purely based on the Druidic symbol. And you find this in schools, colleges, libraries, all over the place. The division into 3. As I said, they tell us in this whole symbolic language. Here you have the Bush holding the Book of America upside down. He's reading a goat story. And in the back you have the U.S. Constitution. The network of families we've been talking about were very much involved in, as I said, they actually were pirates, basically. Where does that word come from? Pyra, the men of fire. They worked for the British government. They were under the tutelage of the Spencer family, the Drake family, the Cabot Lodge family, and the Cecil family. Ogilvy is another one. Remember, David Ogilvy is one of that family. He was one of the most important advertisers in Madison Avenue. Where his brothers are royal. His family goes back to the Secret Service, back in the time of the Queen Elizabeth I. And these pirates are still around today. All of the symbolism pertains to their family line. It may be put before you in a comedic way, but when you understand that these pirate families were not only behind the erection of the Ivy League schools, not to teach you, but to teach their sons and daughters, that they knew we need to educate these creatures. You know, our sons and daughters need to go on to run the empire we'll leave for them. So that was how the universities and colleges got started, and that's how the fraternity lodges within these, the fraternities within these universities are there, so that there's a graduation, you see. But this goes for Menzies, Sinclair, Bacardi, Guinness. So many families that are in the world today, including all these fashion families and the perfumery, are all part of this gigantic pirate network. This is a band, the Lodge of the New Church, that I've been studying for a while. I think they're very tied up in a lot of satanic stuff. Again, it's my personal opinion. And you just keep noticing the symbolism. Here's Rihanna with the skull and bones and the rose motif tattoo. And of course it pertains, one of the most important lodges, as we know, is the Skull and Bones, which is ensconced at Yale University. It was actually set up by this man, Daniel Coit Gilman, who lived between 1831 and 1908. He was a so-called educator, an academician who was instrumental in founding the Sheffield Scientific School at Yale College, and who subsequently served as one of the earliest presidents of the University of California, the first president of the Johns Hopkins University, and as founding president of the Carnegie Institution. He was also co-founder of the Russell Trust Association, which administers the business affairs of Yale Skull and Bone Society. The Skull and Bone Society is a branch or wing of the Russell Trust, and that's a very important organization to study. We said we'd be mentioning the names. Well, this is one of the most important of all. The Russell family and the Russell Trust. It's a wing itself of the British East India Company. Because on the western side it was known as the Hudson Bay Company, the Virginia Company, the Massachusetts Bay Company. And just go into all the so-called founding fathers who drew up that American Constitution. I mean, all of them were members of these corporations that I'm mentioning. British money was in their pockets. There's a lot of information in my article called The Constitution Con, because that's exactly what it was. Their number of the Skull and Bones order is 322. Well, that just happens to refer not only to, again, the sign of Aries, right? 3, March 22nd, the very day that the sun moves into Aries in the normal astrological zodiac. I find that infinitely interesting. But it also refers to chapter 3, verse 22 of the book of Genesis. And what is that verse? And the Lord God said, Behold, the man is become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life, and eat and live forever. Therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubim, and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. So this chapter, verse, is about not only the fall of man, his banishment from the Garden of Eden, the rivalry that he had with the gods for knowledge, that man was actually due that knowledge, but it was hidden from him, that the gods, plural, that alone is dynamite, conspired to keep from man sacred knowledge, and have kept him in ignorance and prevented him from returning to his natural state, penalizing him for a sin that he didn't even know was a sin. And by the way, Eve wasn't even born when the prohibition against the apple, the tree, was made by God. Eve being formed from Adam's rib comes after God has made the prohibition. How innocent can you get? You weren't even born yet and you're being penalized for the crime? Anyway, speaking of strange symbols, here we ask, why is a skull and bone symbol to be found on the tunic of a member of the Knights of Columbus, a Jesuit Catholic order to which many U.S. politicians and public figures belong? The Knights of Columbus. Huge story there. But they're Catholic. I thought everybody at Yale, was meant to be Protestant. Incredible. But you have to watch where it turns up, even in the so-called alternative community. There it is, chapter 322, March 22nd. The very day that the sun rises into the sign of Aries. Oh, what's it doing here on a Nike ad? See there in the flames on the left? I've noticed this on so many TV programs, 322. If you get to the movie Independence Day, briefly, it's either the Gene Hackman character or one of the other characters just pulls back his digital watch. It's just like a instant. It's before the feds sort of crash in and try to arrest them and destroy their premises. Somebody looks at a watch and it says 322. You'll catch this in so many movies.
Good evening, sir.
Happens to be 3 a.m. When do you sleep, 007?
The American CIA sent a man down to work the Strangways. A fellow by the name of Leiter. Do you know him?
I heard of him, but never met him. Has he found out anything? Anything important?
You'd better ask him. You're booked on the 7 o'clock plane to Kingston, and that gives you exactly 3 hours, 22 minutes.
And that's the way that the director is letting you know some more information. I mean, what does this possibly have to do with literally nothing? So it's symbolic. Here it is again with the Malta cross behind it and the Constantine motto, "In this sign you will conquer." Here we notice the checkerboard, and on her belt you see the Celtic sun cross. Because as we said, the Tuesday Well cult, remember, the process cult is very much into Druidic, pseudo-Druidism of course, but Druidic nevertheless. Here's Masonic G. Here it is again. Happy or depressed, don't leave home without your checkered shirt. We showed some James Bond symbolism earlier on. Here we have the sort of mannequin, dazed, hypnotized look, or I've had a long weekend look. But these depressive looks can also be, from something else. The jadedness, what's happening inside that person, must also be taken into account by being involved in all of this. Various colors, suggestive symbolism, all over the modern media today. Here it is in the genetics field, Craig Venter. Absolutely Masonic. Here it is again. I mean, this is a no-brainer. There on the right, you have, I think it's the first degree initiation of the rolled-up trouser leg malarkey, and that actually rope around your neck is the origin of why men wear the tie, by the way. That is the tie that hangs you, or ties you to the commercial world that's controlled by Freemasonry. And then when they write you off the square, say you've just become sort of recalcitrant, and you go in front of the judge. In English courts, I don't know if you have it here, but in England, when you were going to serve the death penalty, the judge would pull out a black square. It was actually known as the black cap, the cap of death, and that would be placed meticulously on the judge's head. A black square, Masonic square, because now, they're telling the victim that he doesn't know. You've been under our law, maritime law, but now since you've become renegade, we're wiping you off the slate. You're no longer a debtor. We're removing you from the board game, our board game, in which you are on the debt of the country. Because it's debtor and creditor in court, nothing to do with defendant plaintiff like we think. And even the rituals of erasing you are very Masonic. It's interesting that. Tarot cards, we saw earlier on with the John Travolta pose. Somebody knows something and it isn't John Travolta. Here we have the same hanged man idea. And we saw last time we met Madonna, positioned as the Queen of Swords, you see. And generically, the Mercedes symbol, by the way, is an old alchemical symbol about squaring the circle. You have to look at the image three-dimensionally. We don't have time to do that, but it's actually a cube inside a circle, inside a sphere, is what it is. And originally it used to be 3 interlocking circles. Before Mercedes chose that symbol, it used to be the famous 3 interlocking circles known as the Triskelion or the... Here we find that all over America in banks and real estate companies, you find the checkerboard. I mean, what's that? Is this a checkerboard? I mean, how Masonic can you get? But again, once you put all these pieces together, none of this is in the remotest bit confusing anymore, you see. It's just after you've done your homework and you've got familiar, this is like so familiar. But the sinister thing is, it turns up, these very similars in colors turn up in the world of children. There it is for Cartoon Network, one of the biggest networks, television networks for children's cartoons. And I mean, not only are these cartoons that they show the kids so sick, but they're absolutely loaded with supernatural and Luciferian symbolism. Album covers, bands like this. What's this all about? You won't ever crack it until you understand the power of this Dionysian, specifically the Dionysian cult that works with androgyny and works with sacrifice. Here's a band that I've always found very sinister, as I said, the Lords of the New Church. The Doorway to the Light. This is a well-known Masonic idea. And the death that you have to go through, the symbolic death that you have to go through, crossing the floor. And the black and white squares just representing, in one level, ignorance and knowledge. Here's Bridget West again. Masonic symbolism. Here's a band, their poster is Masonic. And the chant, where does that word come from? Who chants? You go up to Untermeyer Park, you'll see who chants. Here's Blondie. Again, the tie-in. Remember I said that a lot of these blonde women are really a simulacra, a stand-in for the occult priestess. It's kind of curious symbolism. I've always thought that Debbie Harry, she's not a natural blonde, by the way, so I always found it kind of interesting that she was so physically similar. And if ever, I don't know, you probably all have your favorites and everything, but in my mind, I couldn't even imagine a more projective person, somebody who takes the projections, you know, when you study projection, to me, Debbie Harry, her whole persona is so yin. I mean, this is perfect occult ritual type of person who just, you can just look at for hours without you even knowing it. It's partly erotic, it's partly idol worship, it's fascination, it's all of this allure, you know, this whole cult of mystique, which is partly female or feminine, but infinitely more. And in her, in my eyes, you can really see this ritualistic element at work. Of course, other people will say, no, it's this person or that person has it more. Elvis or even James Dean. It's all a different kaleidoscopic attitude. But I sense the ritualistic element in all of this because there's such a tremendous resemblance between Debbie Harry and Tuesday Weld. And of course, that priestess then will be positioned in different ways. You know, the punk movement, the countercultural movement, they're everywhere. They're all one person, one priestess, one archetype, but several different stereotypes. You find it whistleblown in the movie with Janet Leigh and Lawrence Harvey, Manchurian Candidate. They're literally telling you there that the symbolism involving deep mind control and how that is done via the female, the blonde female, or how the blonde female plays a part in that process. There's many whistleblowing movies that directly bear on this. None better than this film, which I hope everyone will get, The Green, Woman in Green. I've still yet to find a movie that whistleblows what we're talking about better than this. It's a beautifully made movie as well, as was many in this series. Some were made during the war years, so they're a little bit propaganda-based, but those are just mostly the tacked-on endings. If you watch the movies with an occult eye, you'll be absolutely amazed. The only thing is that I've recommended these series of movies before to people, and they don't see it because the symbolism that's in this series is so subtle and so brilliant and so elaborate, it still has yet to be cracked. I hope in the future I'll be able to do a deeper work just on this series, including this phenomenal movie, but just get this if you can.
He killed Holmes! He killed Philip!
What?
You? That I saw him shoot you a second ago.
Not me, my dear fellow. Merely the bust of Julius Caesar. Incidentally, you may have noticed that all through the ages, prominent men have prominent noses.
Not you. Corporal Williams, Middlesex Regiment. Discharged from the army as physically unfit. People seem in order.
Now, Corporal Williams, you've seen service in the Far East, haven't you?
The East.
I thought so. Look at his complexion, Watson. Yellow as saffron. He's been taking antibrine. Cure for malaria. Sniper, aren't you?
Sniper.
Why did you try to kill me?
I had to kill him. I had to. Oh, snap out of it.
Stop it, Watson.
He's shamming.
No, he isn't. Who told you to kill me?
She told me.
She told you?
She told me I couldn't miss. Well, luckily you did miss, you murderer.
Isn't a murderer, Watson. Listen, Corporal Williams. She told you you had to do it, didn't she?
I had to do it.
I've got it, Watson, I've got it.
Got what?
The method used in the finger murders.
Well, what is it?
Hypnotism, my dear fellow. Hypnotism. And it wasn't against his nature. That's the devilish part of it. They picked a man for their purpose whose job was sniping.
Who are they?
Professor Moriarty and his finger murderers. Williams spoke of a woman. I think you'll find that she asked him home tonight for a drink. Nice quiet rooms, soft lights, music.
You got it all pat, Mr. Holmes. What's the lady look like?
Up 30, nice figure, blonde, lustrous eyes.
Here we have again the 666 in the eye. Again, the doves. The columns, right? The mannequin, the one eye closed, the one eye open. The gun, she's holding her hands like not only the religious symbol that is used in Masonry and also in the Vatican as allegiance, but it's also Baphomet, the occult icon of the Templars. I mean, what have they left out? Anything? Here again. What is all this? I mean, does anyone ever ask a question? But then you have the serpentine imagery, which is commonly brought in a lot. We've already looked at that. Look at this again. The colors. We know where those colors come from and how common they are used in religious symbolism. There's Natalie Portman, the model. Python is the actual snake, or the name at least, that was used at the Oracle of Delphi. The priestess was called Pythonia. Right? Pythonia was connected to the female oracle. She lived in the caves underneath Delphi and would come out when there was enough smoke, and often in the night, to come out and give prophecies and readings, spending most of their time in the dark, in the underworld, so that the unconscious mind works more, the melatonin is not as destroyed, you see. And the symbol of the python literally represented that. Pythagoras, the very word Pythagoras, means I am the python priest, the clairvoyant, the wise one. Of course, we know it's also a symbol of the Kundalini as well. This guy's making the symbol, I think it's of Osiris slain. I'm not sure. I'm pretty much sure it's a symbol of Osiris slain. It may be wrong there. It might be the symbol of Osiris risen. I have to double check that. Or it can be a stylized serpent, as in this case. Where does it come from? Again, not only from Greece, but much earlier than that. The symbol of the earth god is either known as Seb or Jeb or Geb. It's one of the people, one or two books think that the name of the serpent god, being Jeb, is where the Masonic G comes from. That's one origin of the Masonic G. I disagree. I thought that myself for a long time, until I went further and found out that it actually refers to the Gaionum, the elite princes of light that hide behind Masonry and are once upon a time connected to the group you may be familiar with, the Sadducees. Elite Sadducees, elite Pharisees. Their elite schools are called the Gaion or the Gaionum. I've gone into that in great detail in the Irish Origins book and DVD. Here it is again, the symbol of the serpent. And the whole idea of enclosure, and the whole idea of the precinct, the sacred precinct, that there's an inner wisdom and an outer wisdom. And the old genetic sorcerers who've been moving technology forward, they're still using the symbolism that pertains to their cult and their order. Here it is in the Sun microsystem symbol and various others. Pepsi being the Egyptian name for the devil, Peppa, or Apep, or Apophis, or Pepsa. Very, very ancient name. Here's one of the original symbols, a purely astrological. Urania, or Spica, Virgo. If she's holding the earth, it's often Urania, the heavens, the heavenly goddess. And it can be stylized again. The serpent can be stylized in various ways to look like the Eye of Horus. Here we have it stylized again with the S. Here we have it stylized. It's clearly a serpent, but this one refers to a group of off-world dragons, right? The Superman movies, especially the original ones, clearly show you that this is a world of immortals who use all forms of crystalline technology and super advanced computers and have power, great spiritual power like the adepts of old in the mythologies of the world. But the S is interesting. This is an example I want you to look at to show you how clever and brilliant these designers are. Jinn is known to Arabic scholars as being the race of demons or cherubim, the sort of spiritual daemonic, I don't mean demonic, but daemonic agencies is the jinn, right? On the J and the I are styled to look like a man, but the undulations of the two ends looks like a dragon man. See how well that's done? And there you have the DNA spiral as well, which people who are familiar with my Atlantis work will really note that why it's important that the man is connected to the dragon. A really incredible logo, that. Sobe is a play on the Egyptian Sobek, who was the friendly crocodile god, the friendly guardian, the original Holy Spirit. Did you know that the earliest version of the Holy Spirit was actually Sobek, the crocodile god? What's it doing on a product with little lizards? Because they know the Egyptian symbolism, and they know that your subconscious understands that that word refers to the Holy Spirit. So when you're drinking in that product, you know, there's a whole occult thing going on. I mean, this would be a lunatic lecture if this didn't have the most imminent, consequences to our lives. That's not an English word. Where did it come from? Even the O is stylized not only like the symbol of the sun in astrology, but like the female breast is that shape. S is the most subliminal of all of the terms of the English language. They've even made the little reptiles there look like the yin-yang. So many aspects to this. These guys have more right to use the dragon because they are connected to that lineage. Bacardi. David Icke had pointed out in one of his books that the British Telecom man is not only Pan or Mercury or whatever, but the red part of his body there, the arm leading down to the leg, is the serpent, the red serpent. CNN not only has the serpentine undulations, but the very word, if you put the vowels back, Khan, means serpent in Hebrew and many other languages. Canaan, Con, what do you got down in the south of France? Can, right? Those are all words. Cohen, Kieran, those are words that directly mean the serpent. And of course, Pepsi were big behind the Obama presidency. Their new logo looks like the eye of a dragon. It's a stylized eye. Here are symbols that were made for the Queen of England, and they actually are in Buckingham Palace. They're directly linked to an order known as the Order of the Garter. I put them here because you can do it the other way. You can first, like I said about the Duncan's ritual, go to the Masonic books, go to that literature, learn what their symbols are first, right? And then go out into the public world and note them. I kind of did a bit of both. I started partly with the world of album covers and movies and rock videos, and then got into the esoteric. But a lot of it was also, I was familiar with the esoteric, and it took me some time to connect the two. So there's no rules. You can find it whatever way you want. Look at the serpent there. Look at the dove. Look at I think they have an owl, yeah. Bohemian Grove, and the lion. And yet these are not just royal symbols, these are symbols that are directly related to the Order of the Garter, which along with the Order of St. Michael and St. George is one of the most elite orders in the world. Those boys control it all. And the Order of the Garter itself goes back to Egypt and to the worship of the god Set, who's the Egyptian version of Satan in many traditions, you see. You have the phoenix as well. Very, very interesting stuff. Here's a typical Masonic tombstone. Go up here to the Riedbergsplatsen. I'll teach you Swedish yet. I think it's Redbergsplatsen in English, but Riedbergsplatsen over there, they have the big graveyard that I've noticed, loaded with the elite families of Göteborg that are buried up there. Just take a camera and go up there one day. It's unbelievable. I said I'd learned 2 Swedish words while I was here. What was it? Told a friend, kackerlackor and schuckling. I'll take those back with me. And he goes, you shouldn't speak bad of Swedish politicians that way. Learn how to say something better about them. Anyway, it says, the brazen serpent, the protecting archon, basically. Here it is on a symbol that was actually one of the national symbols of America. Did you know that this was going to be on the dollar bill? I mean, this was literally one. They had the pyramid and they were surrounded by serpents. And it goes all back to this dragon court of ancient times. Very ancient symbols. This is an old Irish or Scottish Pictish showing not only the Malta cross, the swastika and the serpents. So it's very, very ancient. Then you turn, look, here's a perfect example, right? Say you're studying this stuff and you come across these logos like the one on the right, and you're walking down the street one day and you see an Alfa Romeo, or whatever, or a bank or something like that. And you go, wait a minute. Now you see 1 or 2 and you'll never, like most people in the world, they never make the connection. But eventually a point will come where, you're going to see so much of this that you're going to start asking these questions. And it's a perfectly legitimate study. Just because they don't teach it in school doesn't make that any less true. Here's an emblem of the Thule Society of Germany, showing the skull, the swastika, and the serpents, and the oak leaves. Serpents, you see. There's the 4 letters of the name of Jehovah. It runs left to right. Yod, He, Vav, He is the name of God or Jehovah or Yahweh. And there you see the enclosing serpent and then the Masonic compass and rule. And the leaves of the tree of life. The old Druidic pagan tie-in.